Welcome to this month's Best of Competitive Twitter, the month of April. And as usual, we picked the top 3 most tweeted posts from our competitive Twitter handle. And we always start off with a theme, Don. And I think the theme here is the power of the customer. And both Don and I are actually reading a book called The Thank You Economy by Gary Vaynerchuk. And it's really about social media giving that power to the customer and how we as agencies and clients can really demonstrate how we care for them, because that's what they want. They want to be connected to. And all of these 3 articles that we're going to talk about today relate to the power of the customer, partly because of social media, but basically how we can connect with them. So this first one comes from Fast Company. Do you want to set this one up, Don?
Sure. So it's about 2596 tweets on this one, and it's called 4 Ways to Create Brand Content People Actually Care About. And I know that that's something that comes up quite a bit. A lot of people are very interested and very excited about new content. But in reading this article very quickly, one of the things that really came out to me, and I know, Ken, you have some other ideas on this too, but the biggest thing that I thought that we haven't really touched on quite a lot, I mean, generating content and where content comes from, we have talked about, but one thing is making, it's the 4th point here, the last point, it's make transmedia your friend, your best friend. And transmedia is yet another made-up word, but in a way, to me, it's taking content that you have and making it very available in a series of different, in a bunch of different places. So don't just limit yourself to one channel. It's really multi-channel marketing.
Yeah, you're talking about basically making your content available on all these platforms, the multi-platform approach. And what I got out of this entire article, but we'll start there, is where are your audiences? And then that's where you can engage them. They can be in all these different places, and depending on the content, it might make sense in one channel, it might make sense in another channel. But starting with what you already have is number 1. There's 4 different tips.
Yes.
And they talk about it from the perspective of the customer, but before even all of this, they talk about connecting with the customer and giving them marketing strategies will maintain their mediocre successes as long as we keep expecting engagement and loyalty from our customers without giving them the same consideration. We must give them the same consideration. It's not like something, that loyalty is not a one-way relationship, and it's a 2-way relationship. And starting with the content that we do have from our customer's point of view, to me, is key. Number 2 is let the social conversation lead. And Gary Vaynerchuk, when we do that kind of book report discussion, who would refuse a free focus group to learn more about your products? That's what social media is. You got that outpost, you're listening. What are the tea leaves telling you, basically, from your customer chatter? We actually, one of our clients, a microanalysis company, posted an article useful to the community on LinkedIn, and it was a microanalysis forum, and we got some feedback, and they said, well, why is this nanotech? That's a good question. Maybe we didn't make that clear enough. We can go back to the content, we can change that, but just that they cared enough to talk to us, we need to talk back to them. There's a lot of value in hearing from your customers. The third one is abide by your customers' to-do list. So we go to these industry events, we do all sorts of things from our point of view. What on our editorial calendar when putting out that content matters to the customer. And they have a great example, a Twitter contest to crowdsource the name, and this was an IT example, this season's new laptop bag. Our customers make products. That might be a great way to go, hey, community, what do you think this new product should be called?
Yeah.
And get their involvement.
Yeah, and one other company that does a very good job that's outside of life science is Nokia.
No.
Nokia from time to time will send out something on their Facebook page or on their Twitter and asks people, what do you want your next phone to do? And this doesn't happen. This isn't a once in a while thing. They ask that question fairly regularly, and it gives them great ideas. What are people using their phones for, etc. I mean, that's clearly a much more consumer example, but that's the same kind of sentiment. If I'm making a product, how can I make it better? How can I make it better for my customer? And who better to get that answer from than our customer?
Absolutely. It's a way of both listening to your customer and increasing that engagement and building that goodwill. Let's go for the next article here, Don. Number 2, when Harvard speaks, people listen.
Oh, yes.
This one's from The Guardian.
Okay, so with 1,869 hits, Harvard University says it can't afford journal publishers' prices. It's kind of sad if they can't afford it.
Yeah.
The rest of us are in trouble.
And we kind of talked about this before the call, or before we start this conversation, is when we say things, you have to kind of look between the lines. Harvard could clearly, with their billions of dollars endowment, afford journal publishers' prices. To cut it finer, Harvard University library budget is going to be broke by this $3.5 million subscription fee. Still, that's not the point either, because the library, I'm sure, could get further funding. It's a principle here.
Yes.
And the principle here is that the way the peer review process works, Harvard researchers, actually, let's start off from the very beginning. Your tax dollar is paying for that researcher's research. You're publicly funding this. The public is funding it. Then the researcher goes ahead, does the research with your tax money, and then submits the article to a journal. And then on the other side, the real value of that journal comes from the peer review process, that selection process that vets out the good and the bad, and that's done for free by other researchers who have submitted their time to do that, or actually being designated to do that by someone who works for that journal, the editor, who's also doing that for free. So we've got FREE along this entire process until the publisher actually charges you. I think I read somewhere in the order of one of them was a $40,000 journal. So after all this blood, sweat, and tears and money that you're not doing, it's all your time and resources, you're going to have to jack up $40,000 for that. So that is absurd,
yes,
perhaps. And it's interesting, what are the kind of solutions? And we always look at the comments, because the comments are, we just talk about, that's where the customers talk about. But the customer here is Harvard University. Harvard University is speaking up. And we caught this via Twitter, right? So we can already see the implications of social media and what that can do here, perhaps putting pressure on the publishers, because they either need to step down or they're going to cede control, just like some of the publishers in the media market have to the individual. In this case, the individual could be the university. So one possible solution given by MIT researchers, MIT actually puts those drafts, the articles that have not been published in final form, they put that all online for free. And so you can get that same article for free by going to the university. I think that was a pretty interesting solution to that.
Yeah, definitely, and it makes total sense given the way how democratizing the internet can be. But more importantly, what you said is one of the lines that are in here is that when you do that, it just restricts research. I mean, it actually, all the stuff that you're trying to do to make the world better, to make research more successful, you're actually hampering all that by limiting it for fiscal reasons. It just seems kind of gross.
And what's interesting as we talk about the theme of the customer is, I've read a lot of articles recently about, because research is publicly funded, they're getting grants, right? But what about these parents over here who have a child with a rare disease, and there might be no funding for that, there might be one or two researchers for that. Really compelling stories about how they maybe not even having a science background, but they start to read these articles themselves, and they start getting empowered. And they could be talking to a researcher and saying, what can we do about this? I've got this research. You're preventing that access, right? I mean, they're not somebody with a big library budget. Or I've seen these people put on a lab coat themselves and self-teach themselves and go into a lab. And
there's a movie about that, isn't there?
there could be a movie, is there?
I think
Not
so.
Patch
It's got
Adams.
Liam Neeson in it.
Oh, really?
I could be right about that.
He wasn't running from some plane wreck, was he?
No,
Okay.
unusually, but I think his son was sick, and he's like, "I'll figure this out myself."
That
You could do that.
that is cool that you could do that, and that's what it's all about. You're talking about. I mean, you think about the end goals here. The end goals for the publisher might be to make a nice profit. They said 30% profit, but all of our end goals here are competitive. The researcher is making a difference in people's lives, and we got to think about that.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
the third article is when you get a couple drinks, you can get very creative and
know.
solve basically countries in debt. Could probably solve that. And the impending patent cliff in pharmaceutical. Get a couple drinks, figure that out, move on to the next problem, right?
Absolutely.
So,
2037 hits on this one. Drinking alcohol may significantly enhance problem-solving skills. We already knew that. We drink all day.
yes, you do.
Actually, we don't.
You know,
We wait until Friday. This is really interesting because, especially from the creative angle, one of the things that I was talking to you about, Ken, before we started recording is very, very often, especially when you're doing creative brainstorming, you get in a room and you start banging away, and on TV it looks all very glamorous, but it really is a process. And sometimes you just get stuck, or sometimes that one fabulous idea hasn't come to you. And sitting in a room and try to keep going, it doesn't work all the time, so you need a bit of a distraction. So this article really kind of talks about how people, drinking alcohol, of course, changes your system, and it kind of distracts you, makes you less inhibited, etc. But it's just total common sense. We have around here, we have a lot of little toys around, and very often you'll see one of our account managers go and start playing the guitar, or you'll see us kind of, it looks like we're not being productive because we're on Pinterest or we're looking at blogs, but it just takes our mind off the task at hand, kind of momentarily distracts us, and then we go back and maybe there's that aha moment that comes from it.
at the same time, a few drinks, and then if we're trying to FedEx a booth to Hamburg, Germany, that's not the kind of problem solving actually that this drink can solve.
That'll make it worse.
This actually is about creative problem solving. So again, look at the I'm always being analytical here, but they say drinking alcohol may significantly enhance problem solving skills, and that relates to creative problem solving, the ones that you mentioned, but not analytical problem solving. It actually hurts analytical problem solving. So basically you can do some brainstorming, but in terms of other things which require analytical thinking, whether it is like a trade show booth, stay away from the brew. Coming back to the theme of customer, this part of the essay really intrigued me. The key finding here is that being too focused can blind a person to novel possibilities, and a broader, more flexible state of attention may be helpful for creative solutions to emerge. And what I was thinking about here was that our target audience is life scientists. Life scientists, like anybody else, need to blow off steam. When you hear about what is Apollo 13 failure, it's not an option. Is that Apollo 13? Because there's Apollo 11. Okay, failure is not an option. Well, failure is not an option in the lab. Failure is a constant pain in the patootie. It always happens in the lab, and so you need to blow off some steam. And scientists, like people, we should be able to laugh at ourselves. and have fun and take a break. And in our content doesn't always have to revolve around just us, but it can be about the life of a scientist. I brought this here, Don. This is from Benchfly, one of our clients, for full disclosure. And they print out these kind of pamphlets. This one says, "I'm a scientist," and it's just a little way of saying who we are, and it says, "This is my latest," and it goes through check boxes: hypothesis, theory. And so it's maybe a sketch pad as I look at it. It's a brainstorming sketch pad. And then you can sketch your little idea. And we've actually done this about string theory here. And you put a little title and your signature, and then you can give this to your boss and say, "I hope you tell me it's awesome, think about it a lot, or give me a raise." So just a little fun idea to keep things light. The other, Todd tweeted yesterday on our Twitter from Life Technologies, you see here, about, it says, what has gotten into kids these days. So it's looking at kids, and usually we think about kids and troubled teens, but this is the trouble here's blaming it on science, which is pretty funny. This first panel says 1 in 5 teenagers will experiment with science, and it shows these 5 teenagers kind of gloomy, right?
Yeah, it is kind of gloomy.
But there's one in the back that's a little bit fuzzy, and it goes, "It's this one. This one will experiment with science."
Looks like Daisy from Bones.
I was thinking Daisy from Dukes of Hazzard. So you're talking about.
Oh, wow.
That's what I thought you meant.
We
Yeah,
just see her
it's different.
face, yeah.
And then this one, "I found this in your room. We need to talk." Presumably, it's some piece of scientific equipment. And so this one's really poking fun at science. This last one is this dad looking at the photographer, while in the back is a couple arguing, and it says, "Your daughter has been labeling antibodies again." So we thought this was funny enough to tweet, and I think it's shows good sense from a company to connect with its audience by bringing out the humor in science.
Yeah, and it made its way onto more of a consumer-friendly blog on Failblog.
Yeah, Failblog.
So that's also very interesting that you would kind of, cross the line, if you will.
We saw that in last month's Twitter when they were trying to isolate DNA and make that accessible.
On PBS.
Yeah, very broadly accessible. So how do we make science accessible, connecting with the customer, not just from these are your problems, but this is your life standpoint.
Absolutely.
So. Well, thanks for joining us on this month's, I guess, looking at April's Best of Twitter. Feel free to email us at twitter@competitive.com or tweet at us @competitive. And we look forward to hearing from your comments. Thanks a lot, Don.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. We'll see you next month.